Hi, this is Jenni from Hope, Love, and Tat, healing after a breast cancer diagnosis, and I'm here with Jessie on Nichols George. She is a coding interpreter, speaker, and presenter. I mentioned her book a few times on the site, and she's put her own videos on the site. Thank you. And I really want to talk about your book and hear about the code. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and I'm so excited to be here, and I love this opportunity that we're delving into today, because your forum and this group and the people that are in it are kind of a different perspective than sometimes what I get to speak to, and that really excites me because it's kind of breaking some new realms in here.
Good. Yeah, a lot of really great women in the group are looking for ways to heal. So I've talked a lot about nutrition and meditation and things like that. Your book is a little different. It's the code. I know it involves astrology and angels and tell me about the code.
The code journey is an amazing thing, and I'm just going to hold this up so people kind of get a look at what this does. I think that's showing through.
Yes.
And every year I change the cover on it. So it's a book that comes out on a year-to-year basis. And I've had a few delays this year because I've had some of my own health things to face along the way. But it will be coming out, and it'll be ready for next year, no doubt. Now, the code journey, it's really an interesting thing, because one of the things I notice with this, Jenni, is a lot of people try to get this, per se, understanding of the codes and what the codes are about. And when they first start working with them, sometimes they almost get a sense of challenge, I guess is the way to put it, because they feel like, I don't understand exactly what the codes are. I don't understand exactly what they do. And so for me, what I'm doing with this process is I'm actually working with over 50 different modalities, belief systems, and practices, and none of them in the traditional way. So even though I have this huge, vast background, I'm not using any of the traditional methods. Now, the codes for me are like a language. So when I look at that, it's like taking something in life, whatever it is. It could be an address, it could be an object, a tree, a person, whatever it is. And that speaks to me, whether I'm using a name, whether I'm using an address, whatever I'm using for my launching point. And usually that is going to be like a name or an address of something. And that then speaks to me in its own language. I take that information and I translate it through the Magi wisdom, which is the wisdom that I work with. And that is really a soul essence of wisdom base from all of space and time, if you want to say that. And then I take that through my wisdom or my Magi understanding, and I translate it back out into like everyday language as best as I can, into concepts and practices and ways that we're experiencing life. So the codes for me, in essence, are a language, but they also are about connecting us with our soul self. So when people come to me and say, I'm really trying hard to understand what they are, they're really less about understanding them as it is experiencing them. Because the codes are really about experiencing connection with your own soul self.
The way I have used the codes through your book and through, talking to you, consulting with you is the books, the two books that I have, you can look up every day, you can look up the full moon and read about how, what the energy of the day is. And I've done that, but I've also consulted with you on, when to get shots or when to get a procedure done, the best dates for me. And that's been helpful because my intuition is a little muddled through this last year and a half when I've been, scared and tired and sick. It's hard to get into, tap into your own intuition. So the codes have helped me because then I can tap into the codes by reading about it, asking you, and then I get more information that feels right. If it doesn't feel right, obviously don't follow it. But for me, it's always felt right. So that's why I wanted to interview you. I'm trying to interview everyone that's helped me in the last year and a half, and you've helped me. And I did a video yesterday on healing through self-love, and yesterday's message in your book was spot on for that. So today's a full moon. Is there a message with today's full moon?
I think that a lot of this pieces, as we're in such major transformation right now, which is something you mentioned in the video yesterday too, and that is a big part of this full moon, really deep endings coming about. We're talking major life transitions happening, total changes of lifestyle that are happening. And so, the codes, what allows people to resonate so well with them is that they're speaking that divine truth. They're speaking their soul's truth. And even though the path is a little different for everybody, we have these general influences that are the same. And so this isn't about predicting, it's more about me understanding what the currents are at a particular time and place. And like you say, there are also personalized paths where I can work with people. For example, I do personal year reports where people can look at their own influences on a month-to-month basis. But the book is great because I take it and I use some of those concepts that people already are aware of, like the full moon and the new moon and things that they can relate to, but I share information from the code perspective instead of an astrologer's perspective, for example. So that's where it varies a little bit. And I think when people first connect with it, it's one of those things like, wow, there's an awful lot of truth. That's exactly what I'm experiencing. And those are exactly the challenges that I'm having. So for example, the full moon, let's take a look at that. And for this month, actually right now today, and I'm just going to open up in here. And this is broken down, by the way, for people that want to know. The book is broken down so you have the annual influences, what's going on for the whole year. It talks about our starseed influences, our generational influences, but then I also break it down on a month-to-month basis so that people can look at what's happening for a particular month. I have angel influences and guidance that are going on. Different angels govern different parts of the year. And then also a day-by-day influence. And each one of these things, and the lunar influences, each one of these things I give steps to work with. So I invite people to take further action as opposed to just reading, where they can immerse more in this growth process, immerse more in the learning process and the experiencing process, because particularly when we're in health issues, particularly when we're doing it, you said it spot on, our mind can get muddled because we're taking in so much input, trying to learn about what we're dealing with, trying to deal with doctors and what they're trying to tell us, and trying to be open to other holistic practices and nutritional practices. And the information gets so vast and there's so many different perspectives that it starts spinning us around, and we almost can lose sight of some of the really basic concepts that no matter whether you're taking traditional medicine paths or holistic medicine paths are important for us to come back to. And that's where the codes may come in and say, hey, let's rest a little bit today. Don't push yourself today. Or they may come in and say, okay, this is a day to go ahead and get stuff done. This is a good time to complete things and push through it. So we kind of know, it kind of helps us understand when to push through and when not to push through, based on what the natural flow is, because what the codes are really the energy patterns that are present and available to us, kind of like an opportunity being available to us. So let me jump in here to that full moon where you asked about it. And the full moon energy is really like kind of a wheel of fortune energy right now. Full moon always brings in an intensity. It always brings in a little bit of rebel energy. It always.
If you've worked at a bar or a hospital or an emergency room, you know when it's the full moon. You don't have to look at the calendar.
Yes.
Or if you're a teacher, you know when the full moon is.
or just working with the general public, you know, because people tend to get more reactive at that time. It's natural. There's more energy bouncing around, and anything that's suppressed at a full moon feels the need to get released. So the key with this full moon, when we talk about a wheel of fortune energy, is that it's really about how we're using our power. How much are we playing into that reaction? How much are we coming from a space of love? And there can be really, really fine lines sometimes in these energies. So, you know, we sometimes have a natural human reaction to revolt or to rebel against something. And sometimes that's not in our best interest. Sometimes it is in our best interest to do that. So right now, we find that true leaders are making a big difference. This is a great time for people who are compassionate leaders to step up, to vocalize themselves, to speak their voice. People who are in victim spaces, it's a good time for them to stand up right now. We have overall a big general theme going on this year that is a lot to do with truth exposure, where the truth is coming out and we're having to face the truth. This is my truth right now. You know, it doesn't mean I have to reside in this victim space. And I love that about the codes, because it's about finding your own power even when life is challenging you, even when you might feel like you're a victim, or even when you're having to face the reality that my body won't do this anymore, you know, or at least not right now. Mm-hmm. So I got to find another method, but that doesn't make me disempowered. It doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me less than somebody else because I have this challenge.
Well, I think when you're dealing with a cancer, when you're treating it, when you're dealing with it, the truth comes out in a lot of relationships unexpectedly. Not that if you had friends that were, you know, you thought were friends and then all of a sudden they're not your friends anymore during this journey. It's almost like a magnifying glass is being put on relationships, because you have to put them to the test sometimes and ask for help or expect, you know, people to be nice, and they're not. There's just a way that this diagnosis really does magnify those truths. So it's good to know what days and how the code's going to come out that day, when to confront things, when to push things, when to let things go. But I feel like this journey, a lot of people say, you know, you know, things were going along great, and then I got this diagnosis and now my relationship is a mess. Well, I think your relationship was always a mess. You were doing other things. So it like magnifies, this diagnosis makes you stop doing everything you were doing before to hide the truth, and magnifies the truth. So the transformation's big, I think, for people that can make it work in their favor.
I tremendously agree. And I think that oftentimes it brings up the truth in what's really happening in our food sources, for example, what's really happening in our world and the lies that we've been fed along the way, and having to get into the truth of living healthy, of having to get into that truth of creating personal successes for us. And it is very challenging. Like when you get a cancer diagnosis, what's very interesting about the code patterns of cancer is when we live in the disease part of it and the victim part of it, it is rooted in things such as jealousy and envy and inhibiting our success and feeling less than. When we live in the power that the codes of cancer have to offer, what it does is give us the opportunity to create successes in our life based from wisdom. So it's actually a very empowering process if we want it to be in there. And as you're right, a lot of people, we start to learn the truth about people. The key is, as we learn the truth, is to not hate it or to not get disappointed. And as a human, we're going to naturally have some of that. But, and it's going to be challenging and frustrating at times. But we're also, as you say, it magnifies things to where we can see people as they truly are. And it's not that those people are bad people because they walk out of our life, or they all of a sudden don't want to deal with somebody because they have cancer. It's an aspect of realizing that person is not at a place that they can deal with it. It's not that there's anything wrong with the person that has cancer. It's not that the cancer was the catalyst, as you say. That piece was always there. We just never saw it before. We didn't realize where their insecurities were, or how deep it was, or where they felt inadequate, because a lot of people, when they have somebody in their life that does get something like cancer or some other debilitating or challenging illness to deal with, and a lot of times these illnesses are not visible. Cancer oftentimes is not visible, other than if somebody sees somebody bald, they might take that guess, right? But we start to realize how other people around us really don't know how to deal with these things as a whole, as a society. So the codes help us to hold our own well-being, our inner well-being, through the outer challenges. And in that process, we can become an incredible catalyst for other people simply by focusing on ourselves, simply by focusing on our own life and what we're doing and how we're handling things, not worrying about what everybody else has to do. And like you say, as a person, once you're diagnosed with something like cancer, your perspective changes, because you have to focus on yourself. You have to focus on what your needs are. You have to ask for help when you need it. And you're going to find out who's going to be there and who isn't going to be there. You're going to find out who can provide you with the physical resources and who can provide you with the emotional support, the mental support of things. And over again, I think that's one of the big things that I get about the codes and working with them when people take this journey. And it really is such a personal journey for each person, is that they feel empowered even when life is hitting them hard. I'm going to breathe there.
Okay. So one of the other things about the codes that I thought was interesting is you helped me. I was asking you, if I move, where would be the best place to move? And is there really places that are healthier, and just, if you live the same life but in a different place, are the codes really different in those places?
They absolutely are. And I've had a lot of personal experience with that over the last year in particular. Here again, it doesn't make a space or a person right or wrong or beautiful or ugly. It's all about the interaction of things, right? Okay, so for example, water and oil are never going to totally blend together. They're going to have their own identities going on, and it's going to be very hard for them to mix. It doesn't make oil right and water wrong, or vice versa. They just don't mix. And codes are a similar way. When we're in a location that is favorable in the energy currents for us, where our energy currents interact favorably with the energy currents of that address, that space, that plot of land, then it shifts our ability to heal. It shifts the resources that we're going to have to work with, and whether people will step forward or not step forward, or whether we're going to be very alone in that process. I know in my own experiences, I'm literally living right across the street from where I was a year ago. Literally right across the street. The place I was at a year ago, nothing wrong with it. Absolutely lovely lady there that I rented from. And just a sweetheart. Matter of fact, I just connected with her a week ago. And we sat and chatted for quite a while, and just, lots of very nice things. So nothing on the physical level per se that was wrong. But my code vibration there actually had death energy patterns in it. It actually had energy code patterns where when my code patterns interacted with that address, that created a lot of conflict, that created a lot of problems. Well, during that time, I work a regular job right now while doing this code work and while putting the book out. And during that time, I had to go to regional HR at my work because of conflict issues that were coming up. During that time, I was regularly having semi trucks crossing the center line, almost hitting me, coming and going from work. So that's not a fun experience because you're sitting in that position. At any time I could lose my job, at any time this could happen or that could happen. And you have to be very careful. Travel's not recommended under that type of an energy current. So then I moved across the street to an address that is extremely favorable for me. There's just one small little piece, but that's okay because the rest of it is favorable enough, and it was the reasonable step I could take at the time. So when I made this shift, I had no clue how to pay my rent. I had enough from an insurance settlement to cover me for first, last, and one other month of rent. That was it. I had 3 months covered, and I was signing a 6-month lease here. And I had to put full trust in that code energy alignment, knowing through the experiences I'd already had with the codes, how true they were, and that this was in alignment, therefore I would be okay. And I put my trust in that, and here I am. I've been here 10 months now, and I've had times that a week out, 2 weeks out, I didn't know where the rent was coming from, but it showed up every single time for me. And so when I look at how that has happened and the shifts and the changes and the relationship I have here with my current landlords, which have been phenomenal, and my space is right over their business. And so their business has been flourishing because I've been in this space and the code interaction so favorable here. So getting to see this, absolutely, these interactions make a difference, just as they make a difference with the people in our life who we're with and how that code flow is. And I even see soulmates, people are a little bit different in some ways when we talk about the soulmate type of energy or the spousal type of energy, have come in under some very challenging influences that they're dealing with, but they're going through them and learning how to work with it. So even if we are in a situation where the influences are very challenging, at least even having some sort of understanding how to work with that can make a huge difference for us. And that's why, Jenni, I started to cut the videos. That's why I originally went to the book, because I said a day-by-day guidebook is going to be the most accessible way that I can give people to work with this energy and to come to understand it. And one thing I've learned in all of my experiences is that it is the experience itself that brings the understanding in. So it's not always about having to understand all these minute little details, like how do I do this astrology and this numerology, and it's not always about having to understand all those details. It's about getting the experience itself that helps you grow and to learn and to deepen and to release and to surrender and to make that a beautiful process.
So, as you know, this is a group with breast cancer survivors, and a big fear is recurrence. Is there a way to use the codes to help us with that?
Well, and with the codes, one of the things that we are doing is we are shifting not our code currents, because that's not something we can totally shift, but we are shifting our energy vibration in the sense of whether we're operating from fear or love. And it is the fear itself that when we reside in that fear, is oftentimes what will bring the cancer back. Because I've actually had several friends with different types of cancer who were able to work with nutrition, work with a positive mindset, work with bringing themselves into more compassionate spaces, releasing their own inner blocks and challenges, and have stayed cancer free. So I believe in that essence, where the codes help us to live more compassionately with ourselves, they learn to help us live in a very authentic way and a very realistic way, blending the human experience with the soul's wisdom. And that creates such a beautiful flow of energy. So we shift from the fear to the love. And when we're residing in love, we're going to reduce, minimize, or alleviate that chance for recurrence tremendously. Because that vibrational energy, just like on a physical level, having an alkaline versus an acidic body is going to help keep the cancer away. Supporting the red blood cells with iron, for example, instead of allowing the white blood cells to take over and run rampant and create the inflammation and the disease in the body. It's the same kind of concept. We shift the balance to when we're living in that love and that compassion, it becomes inhospitable of an environment for cancer or other disease to exist.
Well, I can tell you from my personal experience that I try every day to live in that love, and the fear still comes at times. So I think the code for me is helpful because then it kind of makes you feel like you have a little window to look out and see, okay, today I might be more fearful because this energy is happening or that energy. Because I don't think there's a way for me to completely get rid of the fear. Because even if it's completely gone, then I'll hear someone's story or, feel funny and, a part of me feels funny, and then all of a sudden the fear comes rushing back. So I don't think on a permanent, I will never have fear again. And so I think the codes help with that for me is, today I might be more fearful because the energy, because there's a full moon, because that type of thing. But
that's a really excellent point too, is that, we can make these shifts and changes, and oftentimes we think we're going along and we're doing really great, and we don't realize there's still hidden triggers there. And when you do get something like this that comes at you and enters your life and you're not expecting it, particularly, which we aren't most of the time with a serious disease, it's not like we're always aware of that gradual process. It kind of hits us very suddenly. And so yes, it's good with the codes because they do give you some of that background of today has this energy current. We are more prone to have this negative attitude. It's easy to fall into a negative spiral today. And if you understand that going into your day, you have a better chance of turning that around. You have a better chance of not getting swept up in that current. You can take control of your life in the sense of saying, okay, this is not a good day for me to talk to certain people. This is not going to be the day for me to go out into the world and do certain things, because I know in doing those things, I'm going to have exposure to people who are in these negative spaces. And that's not a good thing for me to deal with today, because I'm going to be more easily triggered. So it's not a psyching yourself out like, oh my God, it's a bad energy day. Here again, that's a great thing about the codes. It comes back around and says, here's what you can do about that, or here's how to maximize this energy towards your benefit. And one of the things that I offer, Jenni, and I had to put a pause on it while I was dealing with some of my own health things during the summer and while I'm trying to get the 2020 book finished, but it will be starting back up again, is I do a study group. And people have found that really, really valuable. And I was doing it twice a month, once the full moon and the new moon. And I would like to get back to twice a month again when I can, but I may have to start with once a month again. And that study group gives people the opportunity to come in. It's absolutely free. If they want to make a donation, here or there sporadically or whatever, that's fine. That's great. but they don't have to participate. So they could come in and they could share their experiences and say, you know, I hit this wall today. And I will help them in that group to make the connections of what was happening in the codes to what their experience was. And this expands their understanding of how the codes are working in their life. Because what I learned with people is in doing that, they started to make the connections like, okay, when I see this in the codes, this is how it tends to play out in my life. These are the types of my triggers that come up related to this. So I find that really helpful, and a lot of people, it would bring them greater calm or ease in dealing with things as well. And that sharing helps everybody, because other people oftentimes are having a similar experience in their life saying, yes, I felt really challenged in this wall. And the cool thing about the codes is because there are so many pieces that they can pull on. Some people might be relating more to the monthly things than a daily thing, or they might relate more to the daily piece or the angel piece or the new moon piece or whatever it is. And so oftentimes when I have something going back on, I might even flip through all 5 or 6 spots that are the key active things right then and take a look at it and go, okay, here's the piece that's going on in my life. Now let me look a little deeper at that. Let me read it again. And you know, I can write these things, and it even astounds me. It was almost a little scary with this full moon coming in this time, because always the currents have a couple of days on each side that they're pretty active. And in this full moon energy, it talked about how the earth is reflecting what's happening within us as a global human race. And it talked about the fires that are surfacing and the wars that are surfacing. And lo and behold, if it wasn't right as this energy was kicking in a few days ago, all the fires in California were surfacing up. All the wars started in Turkey, and, you know, all these things were coming up. But it's very cool to take this observational space. And when you go back and look at the codes and go, oh, so here's who's suppressed in their energy right now. Here's who's trying to maintain control. And you get to see these really cool layers of things that are going on in the world and in your own life as a result of it.
Would it be helpful for us to go back and see what was going on when we were diagnosed, or what before that, to see what brought this on? Or do you think we just move forward for us as?
That's an interesting question. And I think for some people, it could be, we could take a look, for example, at what was happening in their personal year at that time and say, oh, okay, so you were on a personal year of major transformation, or you were on a personal year where responsibility was a big key, and you had to start listening to yourself and not other people, for example. Those are pieces that might be helpful for people to grab onto a little bit and go, oh, okay, so I was ignoring being responsible with myself for all these years, and so it finally manifested at this time. So here's my key piece maybe behind it. You know, again, even different types of cancer, and I think I made a note on that here, because yeah, looking at a cancer, there's different pieces. For example, breast cancer, and I find this very interesting, not only from a global worldly political aspect of things moving into the matriarchal energy, but breast cancer in particular is connected to our abundance codes. And so it's very interesting to me as a coding interpreter to see how many women end up with breast cancer who have self-worth issues that they struggle with. Mm-hmm. And that don't feel like they're good enough and don't feel like they are abundant and have had maybe material world struggles or have been heavy in that material world and not connected with the true abundance. And of course, as you know, Lorraine Cohen in our group is absolutely wonderful with dealing with that area of self-worth aspects and the not good enough patterns. but it's very interesting to see that connection. And then when we take a look, for example, of prostate cancer, of course, with men in that aspect, and a lot of the roots of prostate cancer are founded in jealousy and recognition and not feeling recognized enough, feeling like they are not getting what other people are getting. So there's a kind of a similar pattern, but it comes from the male perspective instead of the female perspective. And then we look at other things. You know, again, we could look at different things. Bone cancer is something that my mother had. And this is how subtle some of the patterns can be, where we don't even intend for things to be a certain way in our life, but we've gotten into those patterns. And bone cancer is rooted in code patterns of lies, manipulation, and deceit. Well, my mother, God bless her, and as well-intended as she was, oftentimes lived in the little white lies. Well, it's just a little white lie. Well, we'll just fudge the truth this way, or, you know, it's not a total lie. But she lived in this space of manipulating people, and it wasn't her intent to hurt. You know, she used it with the intent of caring about somebody, but she still lived in that peace, and she dealt with bone cancer. So there's truths that underlie that the codes can show us where some of these root patterns are. And I think understanding where that these root patterns are there give us the opportunity to then address those issues and start to work on them and to start to take steps to move through them and past them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. A lot of the breast cancer patients that have had metastasis, it goes to their bones. So it's almost like, you know, the worthiness, and then that it sounds to me like the little white lies and things are kind of a controlling personality where you're trying to control everything to keep your fear.
And you're living a lie. When it does move into the bones, you're living a lie that you're not worthy enough.
Mm-hmm.
And you're holding on to that lie. You're holding on to that victim space. And so this is why the codes have been so interesting to me to bring out, because the truth is there and people can feel that right down into their cells. I might not like what I'm hearing, but it's true. and it does give us that opportunity to make the shifts and the changes. And you know, no, the work is not always easy. It's not always easy to break out of these patterns, but at least understanding what we're dealing with, we can start to do something about it. And even the smallest of steps are powerful steps.
Yeah, I think for me, the transformation was, you know, you have to put yourself first, which I never did because your life now depends on it. And you have to make sure you eat well and do all of that. And it's really a way to force yourself. Your body forces you to put yourself first. And then I guess for me, the rest of it was, you know, uncovering any other parts of me that were not truthful. We're not, you know, like all these little resentments I was holding on to, even like for my husband, who I love dearly. You know, I have all these little, the scorecard, you know, of what he's done. Now he's left the garage door open again, you know, but it's like on a bigger scale when you're with someone every day.
Right.
And so for me, I have to find all those things and take the meaning out of them. Because I think before I noticed with everything, I had meaning attached to it to prove my story. So, you know, it's not just him leaving the garage door open because he forgot. It's he's leaving the garage door open because he knows it bothers me. And you know, and just the meaning behind everything, the triggers, you know, I just have to cut those cords. And the truth is, he just forgets sometimes. It has nothing to do with me, right? So that
Right.
silly example, but there's so many more examples that I've found that are, you know, ridiculous. So putting myself first and forcing myself to see all the things that aren't true that we believe every day in our lives, it really does. It's amazing. The codes, I like to read this code book every day. It's instead of getting my, you know, astrological sign, I think the codes just have more energy to them. They have more more truth to them. I haven't read them and like looked at the news and put it together that the fire started. That's really interesting.
Well,
Really.
it is very fascinating. I mean, I've called a World Series winner. I've called Super Bowl winner. I've called presidency, the last presidency, which most people didn't think were going to happen. And it's, here again, it's not a predictive thing. It's about being able, I have a gift to read how these currents are interacting with one another. And it's no different than a recipe. If somebody tells me I'm putting X amount of ingredients together, and I can pretty much tell them, oh, so you're going to make a cake.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're going to, if you're adding this ingredient to it, you're going to have chocolate cake. Or if you're adding rosemary flavoring in instead of vanilla flavoring, you're going to have a savory flavor to it. And so I have that gift to see how everything is interacting. And so it really comes into that ability. But as you say, it does. The codes, one of the big things about them, I think compassion is a key aspect with it. I think that truth and integrity are huge chords that are consistently running into the codes, and they're constantly bringing us into that space, which again brings us into divine alignment. It brings us into alignment with God, if some people prefer the term God. And it helps us when we do that, because then we open ourselves up to the greatest assistance we can have in this life. And it is very interesting. But as you say, astrology is, when we read an astrology column, and there's nothing against it, I hand casted charts for years at one point in my life. So I know the astrology standpoint, but it's based on a sun sign. And there are so many dynamics within that sun sign. And I have so many people that tell me, yeah, astrology is okay, but it doesn't quite hit it all the way. Like, it doesn't really always apply to me. And that's the difference with the codes, and the difference when I get into like a personal report, because then it becomes about you. It's about your vibration. It is about what is happening on the Earth's vibration. And so it can't help but be true in that sense. And it can't help but ring forward to everybody. And there's two aspects. It's great to know where your personal flow is at on one hand, but it's also very important to know these global flows, because we're naturally caught into those global flows. And as long as we have to deal with anybody else in this world, which I don't know how to totally evade that yet, we're going to be experiencing these flows in our life, if not directly, indirectly through other people. And I think that awareness for me has been absolutely invaluable, because it has helped me stay out of trouble. It has helped me bite my tongue and keep my mouth shut to keep myself out of trouble some days. It has helped me realize that other people aren't going to be paying attention. So I need to pay more attention when I'm driving on the road, because they're not. These are the gifts and the tidbits, and this aligns us with the wisdom. This aligns us with our soul self, and to operate as our soul self through the human body. And again, that connection, when we can do that, is where we start to experience the power. And the codes allow us to get more and more and more and more experiences of that, until it becomes a way of life. And we start saying, I'm not choosing anything else. And I've had people recently be saying that over the last few months. I am not choosing anything else, because I already have these experiences of what it's like to work with them and work against them, and I'm not working against them anymore.
I would like to use them to raise my vibration, because I just know that if your vibration is higher than a disease, then you can't get it. So for me, I want to raise my vibration, be in line with God, so that I never get sick again. So that's what I want to use the codes for.
that is perfectly great, because the codes can be used literally for anything in our life, and it's the raising of that vibration that is going to subside the fears. It is the raising of that vibration. When you're spending 80% of your time in love and only 20% of your time in fear, well, the chances of you getting a recurrence or a disease is so minimal, because you have such an abundance of that love energy in you. And you stop putting so much focus on being sick, and you put more focus on living.
Mm-hmm.
And making that transition. And I have been there through health issues in the past, where I had to go through, for example, can't remember if it's 6-7 operations over a 6.5-hour period, with 2 top specialists that would have interns waiting for years to get in to intern with them. And during that time, nothing was showing up in the tests. Their equipment wasn't showing anything. Their ultrasounds weren't showing things being an issue, until they cut me open and found out there were really serious issues. And only one of those doctors even admitted, he said, there's no reason for you to be alive. You should have died several years ago. Things like this, that, is not what you expect going into a doctor when every other doctor has told you there's nothing wrong with you. So even though I haven't specifically had cancer, I've had various things. I've got systemic leukemia, which is actually a form in the cancer family. I have a lot of things that I've dealt with, so I can definitely relate to these different things that people are going through, not to mention family members and friends and people who have been through stuff. And when I came through that experience, I had a choice, just like at other points of rape and things like that in my life. I had a choice to live in that victim space or not live in that victim space. And I think the codes help us remember that we always have that choice to be there or not be there, and to give us some encouragement to step out of the victim spaces. And when I came out of that, all of that surgery many years ago, which I wrote about in my chapter in Embraced by the Divine, which is a book that Lorraine is also a co-author on. And it was such a time where I didn't have the money to go do a bucket list, for example. Bucket lists were just becoming popular, and I didn't have the resources and I didn't have the money for that. But I opened the door up and I said, the thing that I can do is change how I'm living my life, not just through diet and nutrition, but how I choose to feel, how I choose to be and exist in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And that did make a difference. And it doesn't mean that you're never going to face a challenge again because you're living through your soul self. It just means you don't let the material world knock you down anymore.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to put a link to your group and to Embraced by the Divine. And can members contact you on the group if they would like to get a reading, or do you call them readings? What do you call it?
Absolutely. I mean, they can contact me with questions. They can follow me on Facebook. I'm happy to communicate with people. If they want to just message me, I'm usually pretty good about getting back to people at a fairly reasonable pace. So yeah.
I'm excited because the code is just another tool for us to really get connected and get healthy and abundant and joyful and all the things we want to be when we're sick that we're not. So thank you for joining me and talking about all of this. I'm not sure I still know exactly what the codes are, but I know how I feel when I read them and use them. So that matters more, I think.
Exactly. And that's the whole point. Just as I said from the beginning, it's not really about understanding everything. It's about the experiences that you're getting from working with something. You don't have to understand exactly everything behind a Chinese herb or the food that you're ingesting necessarily to know whether it's working or settling right in your stomach or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Good example. Well, thank you so much. And I'll put all the links down and hopefully talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.